Now today, Ducati announced the full specs of their V21L prototype bike for the MotoE Championship. And let's face it, this is pretty exciting because not only is it the first electric motorcycle that Ducati have produced, but also the first proper electric sports bike from a major mainstream manufacturer. All I can say is that it looks pretty epic, so here are 7 things that you need to know about it. First up, why does it even exist? Well, last year, Ducati signed a deal to provide bikes for the 2023 FIM MotoE World Cup, so basically the electric version of MotoGP. And it's going to be like a one-make series, so Ducati will provide all 18 bikes on the grid for each race. Perhaps it's a little bit disappointing that these aren't going to be on the market and available to the public, but Ducati do say that the project has strategic relevance for them since it makes it possible to develop expertise for the future. They also go on to say that they're experimenting with technological solutions in the world of racing and working to ensure that everything that's developed in this area can then transfer to motorcycles destined for enthusiastic Ducatisti from all over the world. So basically, they're using this racing series as a means of funding the research to develop the knowledge and intellectual property to build electric Ducatis in the future. It's interesting that they've gone a slightly indirect route. Same with Triumph with their TE1 electric motorcycle. It's not going to be built for the road, and they've just done it because they got funding from the UK government to do some innovation. So to me, what that says is that the big guns don't think that the market is ready and don't think the demand is there to make it worthwhile to properly invest in developing an electric sports bike. Part of the reason's got to be the performance figures, especially when you compare them to their internal combustion equivalent. So this bike tips the scales at a total weight of 225 kilograms. Peak power is 110 kilowatts, which is about 150 horsepower, and peak torque is 140 newton meters. It's still quick. Ducati say it allows the bike to reach a top speed of 275 kilometers per hour or 170 miles per hour at Mugello. But yeah, when you look at their MotoGP bike, for example, that weighs in at 157 kilograms dry, and it makes over 250 horsepower. Even their World Superbike Panigale V4R, that's 168 kilograms with coolant and oil but no fuel, and it makes about 235 horsepower peak. So a massive gulf between electric and petrol still, but I guess in this specific scenario, it doesn't really matter so much because it's a one-make series. So as long as they're quick enough for some good racing and good entertainment, then it doesn't necessarily have to be top draw and outdoing any of the competition. And of course, we're still at the beginning of the electric journey really, so things can only improve from here. Now, before we get on to the next one, a massive thanks to Beeline Moto for sponsoring the channel. They make this awesome little navigation device. It fits any bike and it's nice and neat and small, so it doesn't clutter up the cockpit. And yeah, you just hook it up to your phone. They've got a great, easy to use app, and then you've got easy to follow navigation prompts on your bars. I use it on pretty much all of my rides now, and thoroughly recommend it. There are links down in the description, and a massive thanks again to Beeline Moto for their support. Now, a huge part of the weight of any electric bike is the battery, and this one is no different. So it's 110 kilograms, pretty much half of the bike, and it's not far off double what their V4 petrol engine weighs. So they've really had to design the bike around it. In fact, they call it the most binding and characterizing element in terms of masses and dimensions. Naturally, they've given it a shape that lends itself to being at the center of a motorcycle, and it's made up of 1,152 cylindrical cells for a capacity of 18 kilowatt hours. Pretty much on a par with what's on the market at the moment, maybe a touch more than your average sporty electric road bike. Now, there's a 20 kilowatt charging socket integrated into the tail of the bike, an inverter that's derived from one used in other forms of electric motorsport, and then the motor itself, which weighs 21 kilograms, was developed by a third party to Ducati's specs. They say the whole system runs on 800 volts with a fully charged battery pack, and that's allowed them to maximize the output of the powertrain and optimize it for both performance and range. Now, a lot of thought has had to go into the cooling system too, not only for performance but also charging times. They've developed a sophisticated liquid cooling system, and it actually has 2 separate circuits so it can cool the different temperatures of the battery and motor appropriately. Actively cooling the battery like this means it can roll into the garage and be put on charge straight away without having to wait for it to cool down. So obviously super important for a track bike. And they say it'll take just 45 minutes to get to 80% of its range. No specific figures given for the range yet, but I assume it doesn't really matter for a one make series because they can just change the length of the race to suit. Now the big battery not only powers the bike, but much like a petrol engine, it's structural and it acts as a stress member. Very much the same as their V4 bikes or the new Monster, because it gets an aluminium monocoque front frame that bolts directly to the battery and it weighs just 3.7 kilograms. Same for the swing arm, bolted to the back, and that weighs 4.8 kilograms, and then up top there's a carbon subframe. And so really there'd be nothing much to it if it weren't for the battery. It's a battery, you ride a battery with a fork and a swing arm and a little bit to sit on. Interestingly, as a little side note, they do say in the press release that the geometry of the swing arm at least is modeled on the Desmo Sedici MotoGP bike. Now the whole lot is suspended on top-notch Öhlins suspension, so a 43mm NPX upside down pressurized fork, which is derived from their super exotic Superleggera V4. At the rear, we've got a TTX 36 shock. Both of them are fully adjustable, and there's an Öhlins steering damper too. Brakes are supplied by Brembo, and they say the system has been designed to Ducati specs, which are specific to the needs of MotoE, so I guess a little bit of coping with that fairly significant weight for a race bike. At the front, there's a pair of big 338mm steel discs, and they've got an increased thickness and also some fins on the internal diameter, which should help with the cooling. Now a pair of Brembo's racing specific GP4RR calipers are also used, and a PR19 master cylinder, and then at the rear there's a P34 caliper on a 220mm disc and a PS13 master cylinder. There's also the option for a thumb brake lever if the teams so wish. Certainly looks pretty impressive to me, despite the fact that the specs are way down on what you get on a petrol bike. But look, this is about investing in the future and developing knowledge, and ultimately I'll reserve judgment till we see how good the racing is in MotoE next year. As always though, I welcome your thoughts, so do let me know what you think of it down in the comments. As you'd expect from Ducati, they've pretty much nailed the styling, so I'd love to know what you think of it and whether you'd be at all tempted if they made a road-going equivalent. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.